I can do a little Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to Monday night dinners that I obviously planned very selfishly so I could have my parents here. If you didn't have cake and ice cream, there's still tons more ice cream and only a little bit more cake. So please help yourself. Yeah, that's my dad, Gordon, if you haven't met him yet. And my mom, Hazel. Lots about them in my take. You didn't know that I was going to be this much taller than them. But as I'm sure you all are here for, I guess my mom's going to do some stand-up. I don't know what she's going to talk about, which is terrifying. So please enjoy. Thank you. Yes, I'm Hazel Green Young. I took my husband's name when I got married. I've lived to regret that, but that's another story. We're still married, 30 years. But, so some housekeeping. I'm really bad at keeping track of time. So, I'm only planning to talk about 10, 15 minutes, but just in case, I want you forewarned. And the reason I say that is because my cell phone says I spend 5 hours a day surfing the web. And I work 9 hours a day. I sleep 9 hours a night. I watch 4 hours of MSNBC and 2 hours of Hallmark movies, so I don't even know how that happens. But anyway, so when Sarah asked me if I would speak to her friends, I thought, the ones I've done in the past, the topics may not have been so appropriate, so I thought, well, I'll talk about families because most people have families. So, and I want to give some of you advice because I know some of you are embarking on starting a family. So, one of the things is, before I start, I'll say this, that I talked to my daughters when I first started doing stand-up to see if it was okay if I used them for material. And they said, oh, that's fine. And Sarah said, we don't mind being material for the stand-up because you give me a lot of material for my therapy session. So one of the things if you decide to have a child is you have to have at least two. If you only have one and they turn out fine, then you'll just think that you're just a wonderful person, a wonderful parent. But you have to have a second child because then you might find out you had less to do with it than you thought. So Sarah has a sister, Laura, who's 4 years younger. And when I was pregnant with her, I could tell she was different than Sarah. She just never stopped moving. She was constantly, never went to sleep or anything. So turned out she's that way in real life. She's a very busy, active child. And she's fearless. Now, I'm kind of a paranoid person. I'm afraid of everything. So it was very troubling to have a fearless child. I mean, she'd be jumping out of tree houses. She'd be crawling off of jungle gyms. We'd be at the mall. She'd slide down the banisters. And I was like, oh my God. And so every year for her birthday, I'm like, oh my, she lived another year. And so finally, by the time she was 4 or 5, I thought, well, I guess she's going to survive childhood. But the thing is, even though it was stressful in some ways to have this child who was fearless, it made life interesting. So, for example, when she was about 5, she says, I want to go to China. Well, I don't know how many people, when they were 5, were saying, I want to go to China, but this was Laura. So I thought, well, this child can't even sit still long enough to eat the slider. I don't know how we're going to take a 20-hour trip to China. So I said, Laura, when you're 10, we'll go to China. So I figured she would forget about it, but she didn't forget about it. So we decided we'd go to China. So we live in Ohio, and Ohio is a very kind of a inbred, quiet kind of place. I'm from Detroit. They say half of Ohioans have never lived any place outside Ohio. So they're very happy being there. They don't want to go anywhere, and nobody really wants to come visit Ohio. So when you travel, you always have to go someplace first to get to where you want to go, because that's how it is when you're flying out of Detroit. So we flew to I'm out of Cleveland. So we flew to Newark, that went okay, and then we boarded the flight, 17-hour flight to China. So we get on the plane, in this fancy plane, and they tell you how fast it's going, how high it's going. And then they tell you it's 40 degrees outside the plane, 40 below zero outside the plane. I'm like, I don't really know why you need to know what the temperature is outside the plane. Not unless you go skydiving or something. So we settle in for our trip, and Laura's sitting next to me, and she looks at me 30 minutes into this 17-hour flight, and she says, how much longer, Mom? I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I had chest pain raining up my neck and down my left arm. But then I did what most parents learn to do. I gave her drugs, and I took some drugs. So I hear you had a really nice time in China, but I don't remember a lot about it. So that was my younger daughter. And then there's Sarah. Sarah was an easy child. She's a people pleaser, and she was a cautious child. She wasn't, doing some of the crazy things her sister would do. So that made life much easier for me. But then the pandemic struck, and Sarah moved home. So at first I was kind of excited. I think, okay, my sweet daughter is moving in today. And it worked out really well in the beginning. She'd wake up in the morning, Mama, what can I cook you for dinner today? And I mean, I've been cooking dinner 7 days a week for 30 years. I was like so glad not to have to cook. I was so sick of it. But then a couple days went by, and she wakes up and she says, Mama, what are you making for me for dinner tonight? I said, okay, well, it's all my fault. I was not good in this respect. I did not make my kids do chores on a regular basis, so I have to live with it. I mean, after all, how long will COVID be around? Well, I don't know if you know, but the Spanish flu from 1918 is still out there, and that's what's included in our flu shots. So anyway, so time goes by, and I'm cooking dinner one day, and Sarah comes in the kitchen. That's where a lot of disasters seem to occur in our house. And she says, I'm thinking about going to business school. I thought, oh, okay. And she said, I'm thinking about going to HBS. I said, okay. She said, that's gonna be expensive. I said, yeah, I suspect so. She says, well, do I have any rich relatives who might die anytime soon? And I thought, oh shit, she talking about me? I didn't sleep too well after that. I was like locking my door with my AK-47. So anyway, so that was that part. But so like I said, I've been doing stand-up for a while. And then my last one I did in the fall was about slavery. Well, it didn't go over too well. My young white audience just could not, they kept looking at each other like, are we allowed to laugh like this? So I thought, well, then maybe I need to change the venue. So I called my chairperson. I said, hey, Donna, I want to give a talk about slavery in Grand Rounds. And she said, yeah, sure. I'm thinking, being from Detroit really pays off. I think everybody's afraid of me. So anyway, so when I was preparing for this talk, I was talking about, so I was preparing, but I was watching my usual 4 hours of MSNBC for starters. Because I was trying to figure out, like some people go through these experiences in life and they turn out okay, some people are successful. What is this all about? So, but when I gave the talk, I actually brought a box of Kleenex and put it up front. I said, I know some of you know I'm a stand-up comedian sometimes, but this is not going to be funny. So I'm putting these Kleenex here just in case they're needed. So I gave the talk and it went pretty well. But afterwards, this one colleague came and said, well, why didn't you make it funny? I said, I already tried that. So anyway, so I'm watching my 4 hours of MSNBC and I'm seeing all these people and they're so successful. And so I'm starting Googling because I want to see, well, what made them successful, where they come from, who their parents were. So then I realized that's why I have 5 hours of Googling or surfing the web, because while I'm reading x-rays, I'm surfing the web. While I'm watching the news, I'm surfing the web. Maybe I'm surfing in my sleep. Sleep surfing, who knows? But anyway, I started to see some trends about people who are kind of successful, because a lot of people look at themselves and they're like, oh, I'm so successful because I'm so smart and I work so hard. But I started thinking, I think it might relate a lot to who your parents are, and you didn't have any choice. This is who you get. So I thought about my parents. Their grandparents were both slaves, but they survived and they became teachers. And I have 7 sisters, and 5 are PhDs, and 3 of us are physicians. So that turned out okay. Then I look at my daughters, and they have a black mother, Chinese father, and both of them are doing quite well. So, but I started thinking though, I wonder if I had a rich white parent, would I be in better shape? And I mean, you look at people like Mitt Romney, he's a pretty decent guy. But then I thought about Don Jr. So anyway, like I said, I was going through all this. And then I know, like if you guys decide you want to have a family, sometimes, it doesn't happen as easy as you like. So you go see a fertility doctor. So you go to a fertility doctor and they take the sperm and the eggs, put it in a blender, mix it up, and you get this pre-person. In the meantime, you're hoping that they clean out the pipette because you don't want your kids to look like that 600-pound guy that was in the waiting room. It does happen. But anyway, so so you got these pre-people. And so some people, when they complete their family, they're like, okay, well, I'm gonna save these people and let somebody else adopt these people. So I was sitting there one day, and I don't know if I had had too many edibles or whatever, but I started imagining that I was like eavesdropping on these kids, on these pre-people, I guess I'll call them. And like, the one thing I had thought about earlier was how when people are having these kids and they're thinking, oh, I want a boy because they're gonna come out this way, or a girl's gonna come out this way, and I said, you can't predict. You might have a boy who's like a LeBron James, or he might be more like O.J. Simpson. So, but people plan all these, gender reveal parties, and I think that's kind of ridiculous. Because first of all, it means nothing. I think the sex of the child doesn't tell you a whole lot about that person. So my thing is, let he, she, or they plan their own gender reveal party. But anyway, so when I was thinking about these pre-people, I was thinking they were having like a parent reveal party. So they were sitting there on the shelf in the box waiting to be adopted, thinking, well, who do I want to be my parents? So they might say, well, I want school teachers for parents because a lot of people who have school teachers for parents do turn out well. I mean, there's Stacey Abrams, but her brother's in jail, so. And then somebody else says, well, I want a multiracial family because a lot of those do really well. I mean, you got people like Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he's unemployed, but and then you got Barack Obama, the most famous biracial guy in the world. So, and then we talked about having rich white people. But there was one really rich white person who actually happened to be biracial who turned out well. It was Patrick Francis Healy. He was president of Georgetown University, the first black person to ever be a president at a PWI. And his father was a rich plantation owner in Georgia, where my family's from, and his mother was a black slave, but yet he became president. So he benefited perhaps undoubtedly from having a rich white father. But there was one little girl sitting in a corner, just very quietly listening to everybody. And she said, I want Haitian immigrant parents, because when I grow up, I want to be president of Stanford University. And then Charlotte Gay, congratulations and thank you.